Daniel had always been skeptical of small towns, especially ones that seemed too perfect. But when his car broke down just outside Evergreen, he had no choice but to stop. At first, the town seemed like any other sleepy American town. Neatly kept houses, quiet streets, and a diner that smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. But something was off. The weather never changed. Every morning the sun rose at exactly the same time, casting the same golden light over the same streets. The same cars passed by at the same moments, their drivers nodding in unison as if following a script. Conversations in the diner repeated word for word, and even the local news played the same headlines every evening. Daniel thought it was a coincidence at first. Maybe the town was unusually routine-bound. Maybe it was a quirk of rural life. But when he woke up on the second morning and realized he had already lived the day before, his skepticism turned to unease. He tried to leave, but the road leading out of Evergreen always looped back to the same point, as if the town itself refused to let him go. He asked the locals, but they didn't seem to notice anything strange. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too vacant. It was as if they had forgotten what time truly meant. By the third morning, Daniel understood the truth. Evergreen was trapped in an endless loop. The same day played out over and over, with no one seeming to realize it except him. And as the repetition continued, a creeping dread settled in his chest. If he couldn't escape, how long would he be forced to relive the same day? And more importantly, who or what was keeping the town trapped? Daniel's first instinct was to test the limits of the loop. He started with the diner, hoping someone might recognize the repetition or at least offer a clue. The same waitress served him eggs and toast at precisely 7:15 a.m. Her smile frozen in place like she had practiced it for years. When he asked her about the weather, why it never changed, she simply laughed and said, "It's always a perfect day here." Her voice was warm, but there was something unsettling about the way she said it, as if the words were rehearsed and devoid of genuine thought. He tried to leave again that morning, driving down the same road that had looped him back the day before. This time, he kept a careful eye on the signs, marking landmarks to track his progress. But no matter how far he drove, the road always curved back to the same intersection, the same gas station, the same billboard advertising a festival that never came. Frustrated, he returned to the town square and began questioning the locals. Some looked at him as if he were mad. Others simply repeated the same phrases they had the day before. No one seemed to remember anything different. As the day wore on, Daniel noticed more unsettling patterns. The same group of children played hopscotch outside the school, their laughter echoing in perfect synchronization. The same man mowed his lawn at precisely 10 a.m., never deviating from his path. Even the birds in the trees chirped in the same rhythm each hour. It was as if the town had been frozen in time, replaying the same script without deviation. But then, something changed. At the diner, Daniel noticed a flicker of recognition in the waitress's eyes. She hesitated before placing his coffee on the table, her fingers trembling slightly. "Wait," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clinking of dishes. "You're still here?" Before he could respond, she shook her head, as if clearing a fog from her mind. "Never mind. Enjoy your meal." And just like that, she was gone, retreating behind the counter as if nothing had happened. Daniel's pulse quickened. He wasn't alone. Someone else remembered. He needed to find them before the day reset again. But as he stepped onto the street, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The sky, which had always been a perfect blue, was beginning to darken. The air felt heavier, charged with something unnatural. He wasn't just trapped, he was being watched. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel decided to investigate the town's history. He remembered seeing a small library tucked between the post office and a shuttered bookstore. If Evergreen had been trapped in this endless loop for any length of time, there had to be records, newspapers, books, anything that might explain what was happening. The library doors creaked as he pushed them open, the scent of old paper and dust filling his lungs. Rows of bookshelves lined the walls, untouched by time. The librarian, a frail elderly woman with silver hair and hollow eyes, sat behind the front desk, her fingers idly flipping through a book that never seemed to change pages. Daniel approached cautiously. "I need to look up some old records," he said. "Anything about the town's history." The librarian didn't look up. "Everything you need to know is already known," she murmured, her voice distant. "The past repeats itself." Daniel ignored her cryptic response and made his way to the archives, where he found stacks of yellowed newspapers and brittle yearbooks. He flipped through them, scanning for any mention of unusual events. At first, the articles were mundane: local festivals, school sports results, town council meetings. But then, buried in an issue from nearly 50 years ago, he found a headline that made his breath hitch: "Evergreen residents report missing time." The article described strange occurrences: residents waking up to find entire days missing, clocks resetting themselves, people disappearing without explanation. The town had once been vibrant, full of life and movement, but over time it had become eerily stagnant. The piece ended abruptly, as if the writer had stopped mid-sentence. Daniel's hands trembled as he turned the page. There were more articles, all hinting at the same phenomenon: people forgetting, time looping, and something lurking beneath the surface of the town. One entry caught his attention in particular: a reference to an old legend, whispered among the townspeople, about a creature that fed on time itself. The article described it only as a shadow that moved between the cracks of reality, something that had been bound to Evergreen centuries ago by an unknown force. A chill ran down his spine. Was this loop the result of some ancient curse? Had the town been sacrificed to keep something contained? Before he could read more, a sudden gust of wind rattled the library windows, though the sky outside remained still. The librarian let out a low, guttural laugh, her voice no longer frail but filled with something older, something wrong. "You shouldn't have looked too deep," she whispered, her hollow eyes locking onto his. "Now it knows you're here." Daniel stumbled back, heart pounding. He turned to flee, but as he reached the door, a shadow flickered across the floor. a figure standing just beyond the threshold, watching him. It was tall, its form shifting like smoke, its eyes glowing a deep, unnatural red. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving behind only silence. Daniel's breath came in short gasps. He had uncovered something terrible, something that had been buried beneath the town's perfect facade. And now, whatever had been keeping Evergreen trapped had taken notice of him. Daniel's mind raced as he stumbled out of the library, the librarian's eerie warning still echoing in his ears. He had to get out, had to find a way to break the loop before it was too late. But as he turned the corner, the town that had once felt eerily familiar now seemed twisted, its perfect facades cracking under the weight of something unnatural. The same people walked the same streets, their expressions frozen in place, their movements eerily synchronized. And yet, something had changed. The sky was darker now, the sun obscured behind a thick, unnatural haze. The air felt heavier, charged with an unseen force. As Daniel moved through the town, he noticed something disturbing. Some of the townspeople weren't moving in perfect rhythm anymore. A man in a business suit stood motionless on the sidewalk, his eyes unfocused, his mouth twitching as if trying to form words that never came. A child sat on the curb, rocking back and forth, whispering something under their breath in a language Daniel couldn't understand. And then he saw her. The waitress from the diner stood at the edge of the town square, her expression haunted. When she saw him, she motioned frantically for him to follow. Daniel hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was watching, then hurried after her. She led him through a narrow alleyway, past rows of identical houses, until they reached a small, dimly lit apartment above a shuttered bookstore. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of old paper. The waitress, Clara, she finally told him her name, paced anxiously, her hands trembling. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. "The thing in the shadows?" Daniel nodded. "I think I did. What is it?" Clara swallowed hard. "It's the reason we're stuck here. It's feeding off us, keeping us trapped in this loop." She hesitated before continuing. "I've been trying to remember, trying to fight it. But every time I get close, something pushes me back. Like my thoughts aren't entirely my own anymore." Daniel's stomach twisted. "How long has this been happening?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know. It feels like forever. Some people forget entirely. They just keep repeating the same day, never realizing they're stuck. Others disappear." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "Disappear?" Clara nodded. "One by one, they just stop showing up, and no one notices. It's like they were never here." Daniel clenched his fists. He couldn't let himself become another forgotten soul in this cursed town. He had to find a way out. Clara reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with frantic handwriting. "I've been writing everything down, everything I remember. I think there's a way to break the cycle, but I'm not sure how." She flipped through the pages, pointing at a sketch of a large, crumbling building on the outskirts of town. "This place, it's where it all started. Something happened there long ago, something that bound the town to this loop." Daniel stared at the drawing. "We have to go there." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Tonight, before the loop resets again." As they prepared to leave, the air around them seemed to shift. The shadows on the walls stretched unnaturally, flickering as if something was moving just beyond sight. And then a sound, a low guttural whisper that sent a shiver down Daniel's spine. They weren't alone. Daniel and Clara moved quickly through the darkened streets, the town's eerie stillness pressing in around them. The usual hum of life, the chirping birds, the distant lawn mower, the rhythmic ticking of the clock tower, had been replaced by an oppressive silence. Even the wind had ceased to blow. As they approached the outskirts of town, the air grew colder, the sky above thick with swirling clouds that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The crumbling building Clara had drawn in her notebook loomed ahead, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into the void. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears as they stepped inside. Dust and decay filled the air, the scent of rot clinging to every surface. Clara clutched the notebook tightly, her breath shallow. "This is where it began," she whispered, "where they made the deal." Daniel frowned. "Deal?" She nodded, flipping through the pages. "The town elders, they wanted peace, prosperity. They didn't want time to move forward, so they made a pact with something that feeds on time itself. They bound it to the town, and in return, Evergreen would never change." Daniel's stomach twisted. "But that's not peace. That's imprisonment." Clara met his gaze, her eyes filled with sorrow. They didn't understand what they were sacrificing. They thought they were preserving perfection, but they were dooming everyone who came after them. A sudden gust of wind howled through the broken building, carrying with it a whisper, low, guttural, inhuman. The shadows along the walls shifted, stretching toward them like grasping fingers. Daniel's breath hitched. The thing was here. Clara took a shaky step forward. "There's a way to break the loop, but it requires a sacrifice." Daniel's throat tightened. What kind of sacrifice? Clara hesitated, then whispered, "One of us has to stay behind." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The creature that fed on time, it had to be fed. If they severed the connection, it would lash out, and someone would have to take their place in the cycle. "No," Daniel said firmly, "there has to be another way." Clara shook her head. "There isn't. If we both try to leave, it will stop us. One of us has to remain to hold the balance." Daniel clenched his fists. He had come so far, endured so much. He couldn't let this be the end. But as the shadows closed in, he knew he had no choice. Daniel awoke to the sound of birdsong, the golden light of dawn spilling through the window. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream, but as he sat up, the weight of what had happened settled over him like a suffocating blanket. He was free, but at what cost? Clara was gone. He remembered the final moments in the crumbling building, the shadows reaching for them, the creature's whisper growing louder, more insistent. Clara had made her choice. She had stayed behind, willingly stepping into the void to sever the town's connection to the entity. And as the loop shattered, Daniel had felt himself being pulled away, the world twisting around him in a blur of light and sound before he collapsed into unconsciousness. Now he was back on the road, his car miraculously intact, the town of Evergreen nowhere in sight. But something was wrong. The landscape around him felt off. The trees were too still, the air too heavy. He checked his phone. No signal, no date or time displayed. His watch, once a reliable companion, ticked forward erratically, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. And then there was the hunger. It gnawed at him from within, a deep, aching emptiness that no food could satisfy. It wasn't physical, it was something deeper, something tied to the very fabric of time itself. He had escaped the loop, but a part of him remained behind, tethered to the creature that had fed on Evergreen for so long. As he drove, he passed a mirror hanging in a roadside diner. His reflection stared back at him, pale, hollow-eyed, and in the space of a blink, something flickered behind his pupils, something red. The loop was broken. But the price had been paid, and Daniel feared he was never truly free.